The blood trail led straight to his water well. Caleb Warwick had seen enough wounded animals in his 37 years on this god-forsaken ranch to know the difference between deer's blood and something else entirely. But when he followed those crimson drops around the corner of his barn, what he found made his hand freeze on his rifle. A young Apache warrior lay slumped against the stone wall of the well, one hand pressed to a gaping wound in his side, the other reaching weakly, desperately toward the wooden bucket hanging just 3 feet above his head. His breathing came in short, ragged gasps, his dark eyes tracking Caleb's every movement with the sharp wariness of someone who'd already accepted that death might come from any direction. What would you do in Caleb's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And like this post, if this scene grips you as much as it did me. This was 1847, and in this part of the territory, finding an Indian on your land meant one thing: trouble. The kind of trouble that got men scalped in their sleep or burned alive inside their own homes. Every neighbor within 50 miles would have told Caleb the same thing: put a bullet in the savage's head and bury him deep. Caleb raised his rifle. His finger hovered over the trigger. It would have been the smart thing, the safe thing, the expected thing. But something in those eyes stopped him cold. It wasn't just pain he saw, it was thirst, not the kind that comes from a skipped meal or a hard ride. The kind that burned through a man's body like fire, left his lips cracked and his skin gray. Caleb had felt it once during the drought of '44 when the creek ran dry and he'd gone 3 days without a drop. That same desperation, raw, human, undeniable, now stared back at him through a mask of blood and dust. The warrior's lips moved. No sound at first, just breath and blood. Then one word: horse and broken water. Caleb lowered his rifle. He didn't know what possessed him. Loneliness, maybe. Madness, more likely. His brother back east would say the frontier had scrambled his mind. His neighbors would call him a fool. But as he knelt beside the stranger and tipped the bucket to his lips, watching him drink like a man saved from drowning, Caleb knew one thing for sure: he'd just made a choice that would change both their lives forever. Can you feel the weight of Caleb's decision? Drop a like if this moment hit you hard, and let me know in the comments what you think he should do next. The Indian drank deep, draining 3 full buckets before his trembling hands could hold the rim steady. Caleb watched every gulp, his thoughts racing with the implications. In this land, mercy could be mistaken for betrayal. He wasn't just risking trouble, he was signing his own death warrant. Then Caleb saw something that made his blood run cold. The wound in the man's side wasn't from an animal or accident. It was a bullet hole, fresh, still bleeding. Powder burns laced the skin around it. A close-range shot, recent. Which meant someone had tried to kill this man and might still be tracking him. Might be following that same blood trail straight to Caleb's ranch. The warrior seemed to sense his fear. With effort, he raised a hand and pointed to the horizon, then drew a line across his throat. Danger, soon. Caleb's heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct screamed, move the man, hide the evidence, pretend it never happened. But one look at the Apache told him moving him now would kill him. And leaving him here was like hanging a target on both their backs. That's when he heard it. Hoofbeats, faint but growing louder. Multiple riders, moving fast. The Indian heard it too. His eyes went wide with fear, and he tried to press himself deeper against the well stones as if sheer will could make him vanish. Blood bloomed fresh between his fingers. Caleb acted fast. He grabbed the empty bucket and tried to douse the blood trail, but there wasn't enough time. The riders would be here any minute, maybe less. He looked down at the man he'd just saved. A stranger whose presence on this land could get them both killed. But those dark eyes, they held something Caleb hadn't expected. Gratitude. Pure, unfiltered gratitude. The hoofbeats grew louder. Close now. 5 riders, maybe 6. Not a friendly visit. Caleb made his choice in a heartbeat. He couldn't carry the man, but he could hide him. The old root cellar behind the barn if they could make it that far. But just as he reached down to help, the warrior gripped Caleb's wrist with surprising strength and shook his head. Then he smiled. Not the smile of a man being rescued, but the knowing smile of someone who already understood exactly who was coming over that hill. What's going through Caleb's mind right now? Like this post if the suspense is killing you, and comment with your predictions about who's coming over that ridge. The riders came over the ridge like a thundercloud, rolling low and mean. 6 men on horseback, their coats dusted in trail grit, rifles glinting like fangs in the fading afternoon sun. The lead rider sat tall in the saddle reins, loose in one hand, the other resting near his holster, with the ease of a man who had drawn more times than he could count. Caleb Warwick knew that face long before the man got close enough to speak. Marshal Dixon Webb, a name that carried the same weight as a death sentence in these parts. A lawman by title, but his justice was the kind that came hot from a barrel and left widows in its wake. He was known from Santa Fe to the Rio Grande not for mercy but for the way he cleaned up Indian troubles with bullets and fire. And he was riding straight toward Caleb's well. Caleb stood in front of it, blocking the wounded Apache from view with his own body. His mind raced, sweat slicking the back of his neck despite the cool breeze. He kept his hands loose at his sides like any rancher interrupted mid-chore. But his stomach was a knot of barbed wire. Webb reined in just 10 feet away, his pale eyes scanning the property like a hawk sizing up prey. "Afternoon, Warwick," he drawled, voice smooth and slow like molasses over a blade. "We're tracking a wounded Indian. Blood trail leads straight onto your land." Caleb forced a dry swallow. "Ain't seen no Indians, Marshal. Been working the south fence all day." Webb's eyes slid over the ranch like a rattler in tall grass. He missed nothing. That's what made him so dangerous. His gaze landed on the damp patch of dirt near the well where Caleb had tried and failed to wash away the blood. He stared at it long enough to make Caleb's pulse spike. "That's so," Webb said, dismounting slow and deliberate. "'Cause that sure looks like blood to me. Fresh. And unless you've been butchering cattle beside your drinking water, I'd say someone's been here recently." Behind Caleb, the wounded warrior lay silent, hidden by the stone wall. But Caleb could feel him there, could feel the tension rolling off him like heat from a forge. Webb took 3 slow steps closer. His men fanned out behind him, hands near their weapons. This wasn't a visit. This was a hunt. "You know what the penalty is for harboring Indian fugitives, don't you?" Warwick Webb asked, his voice low and almost conversational. "Same as treason. Rope round the neck till dead." The words landed heavy in the air, thick with threat. Caleb felt every muscle coil tight. He was a breath away from being dragged behind a horse and hanged before sundown. And still, he didn't move, didn't flinch. That's when the impossible happened. A voice, low, firm, and spoken in perfect Apache, cut through the tension like a knife through canvas. Webb froze mid-step, his head turned slow, his face draining color like someone had pulled the cork from his bloodline. His hand fell from his pistol, eyes wide, mouth working without sound. The warrior behind the well was speaking again, louder now, with clarity, with weight. Caleb glanced back and saw him, Ayana, though he didn't know the name yet, sitting straighter though blood still seeped from his side. His voice carried like wind through canyon stone. Webb took 1 staggering step back. "Dear God," he whispered. "You're him." His 5 men dismounted as one, weapons forgotten. Shock rippled through them like lightning over dry grass. "Do you have any idea who you're helping?" Webb asked Caleb, but his voice held no accusation, only fear. Caleb said nothing. His world had tilted sideways and he was just trying to stay upright. Ayanna spoke again, this time in English. Strong. Calm. Tell him, Marshal, he said, eyes locked on Webb's. Tell him why you came riding so hard. Webb's jaw clenched. His face had gone from white to gray. This is Ayanna, he said quietly. Son of Chief Takakota. He's the one who brokered the peace treaty with Fort Richardson last spring. Caleb felt the words hit like a hammer to the chest. The peace treaty. The fragile thread that had ended 3 years of bloodshed between settlers and Apache. The reason farms hadn't been burned and families hadn't vanished in the night. And the man who'd made it possible was bleeding to death at Caleb's well. But if he's a peacemaker, Caleb said slowly, why's he running? Why's he shot? There was an ambush. Ayanna answered, his breathing labored but steady. 3 days ago, I met with Colonel Morrison about expanding the treaty to cover the southern territories. But Morrison had enemies. Webb looked sick. Morrison's dead, shot in the back during an Indian attack. That's what they want you to believe, Ayanna replied. But the men who killed him wore war paint and spoke just enough Apache to fool the witnesses. They were white men, hired, sent to make it look like betrayal. Caleb's stomach turned. Someone had staged the murder to frame Ayanna, someone who wanted the treaty to fail, who Webb asked, but the look on his face said he already knew. Ayanna's eyes went hard. The same men selling guns to the renegade bands. The same men profiting off this war. The same men who sent you to finish what they started. Webb staggered again, then drew himself upright. You're talking treason, corruption in the territorial government. These are serious claims. They'll stay claims, Ayanna said, until I get to the Apache Council tomorrow and prove them. That's why they tried to kill me. Caleb looked at the faces around him, Webb's men no longer so sure. He could see it in their eyes. Doubt, guilt, memory. You're wanted for Morrison's murder, Webb said. I have orders, dead or alive. Dead is more convenient, Ayanna said. Dead men can't testify. One of Webb's deputies, a young man with nervous eyes, stepped forward. Marshal, that shipment of rifles that went missing 3 months ago. I saw those same rifles last week, in the hands of settlers heading south. Webb's face darkened. Shut up, Bradley. But it was too late. The floodgate had cracked. Other deputies exchanged looks, nod, whisper. Ayanna had done something few men could. He'd sown doubt in the hearts of lawmen, without drawing a gun. And Caleb knew this wasn't just about the man at the well anymore. It was about everything. Justice, peace, and the truth standing on one man's ranch bleeding into the dust. The suspense is building. What do you think will happen next? Like this post if Ayanna's courage inspires you, and share your thoughts in the comments. The silence stretched thick and brittle. Webb's 5 men shifted in their saddles' hands. Hovering near weapons' eyes, darting between their marshal and the wounded Apache who had just accused half the territorial government of treason. Caleb Warwick stood in the middle of it all, heart pounding so loud he swore it echoed off the barn walls. He had only wanted to help a man dying of thirst. Now he was standing at the edge of something deep and dangerous, a conspiracy that ran through the very veins of power in the territory. Webb's eyes were hard chips of frost. Even if what you're saying is true, he said, slow and measured, I have my orders. You're wanted for Morrison's murder. I'm to bring you in, dead or alive. Dead would make a lot of people sleep easier tonight, Ayanna replied. Dead men don't ask questions, don't point fingers, don't bring letters. Letters? Webb's head tilted, suspicion sharp in his voice. With trembling fingers, Ayanna reached down to the leather pouch at his belt and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was blood-stained at the corner, the edges curled from wear and heat. He held it out like a relic, sacred and damning all at once. "This," he said, "is why they tried to kill me." Webb didn't take it. He stared at the letter like it might bite him. "What is it?" Caleb asked. "A letter from Colonel Morrison," Ayanna answered. "Written the night before he died. He discovered who's been supplying weapons to the renegade tribes, names, dates, payments. Enough evidence to hang a dozen men." Ayanna's eyes never left Webb's, including someone inside the marshal's office. Webb's face turned the color of ash. The hand near his pistol trembled. Behind him, his deputies were no longer still. One looked away, another began checking his horse's reins like the leather held answers. Even the air seemed heavier now. "You're lying," Webb said, but his voice had lost its bite. "Am I?" Ayanna unfolded the paper, held it out again. "Morrison trusted me, gave this to me in case something happened. Told me to get it to Fort Richardson, said it was his insurance." Webb stepped forward, hand inching toward his holster. "Give me that letter." Ayanna didn't move. "So you can destroy it?" "No. I'm your law, Indian. You don't get to. You're no law." Ayanna cut in sharp and cold. "You're a weapon in someone else's hand. But I'll make you an offer." The Apache's voice dropped just enough to turn steel into velvet. "Let me live long enough to reach the Apache Council tomorrow, and I'll make sure your name stays off the record." The words hung in the air like a knife pointed between Webb's ribs. Caleb could see the calculation begin behind the marshal's eyes. How many lives would it cost to bury this? How many men would stand in his way? And that's when Deputy Bradley dismounted. Slow, quiet. He walked toward the well hand's visible voice, shaking but steady. "Marshal, I've been thinking about something." Webb didn't turn. "Remember that shipment of rifles went missing 3 months ago? Supposed to be headed to Fort Canyon." "What about it?" Webb growled. "I saw those rifles, Marshal." 2 weeks later, in the hands of settlers moving south, new settlers, white folks, same brand marks, same crates. Webb spun on him. "You accusing me of something?" Deputy Bradley's jaw tightened. "I'm saying it don't add up, and it hasn't for a while." The other deputies looked at each other, faces tight, silent nods, the kind that spoke of late-night suspicions finally given voice. Caleb watched the moment unfold and felt the shift like wind changing direction. Webb hadn't just lost control of the scene. He was losing his men. The marshal's lips curled. "You're all fools," he hissed. "You think this savage's word means anything against mine? You think some paper and a couple of traitors is enough to bring me down?" He stepped back, drawing his pistol in one smooth motion. But he didn't aim it at Ayanna, he aimed it at Caleb. "You helped him," Webb snarled. "You brought this on yourself." "I gave a dying man water," Caleb replied, not moving. "That's all." But the moment was charged. Webb's eyes wild, his finger twitching. Ayanna struggled to his feet, one hand still pressed to the bloody wound at his side. The other reached out, steady. "The truth doesn't care who speaks it, Marshal. It just is. You murdered a United States officer." "No," Ayanna said. "But I know who did." The click of a cocked hammer echoed sharp as a gunshot. Bradley raised his revolver. "Stand down, Marshal!" Webb's aim faltered. 3 more deputies followed suit, weapons raised at their own commander. Only one man remained loyal. Hawkins, grizzled, quiet, and dangerous. He didn't draw, but he didn't back away either. "You're making a mistake," Webb said, sweat beading now on his brow. "A mistake that'll cost you your badges." "Maybe," Bradley replied. "But I've made enough mistakes following you. I won't make another." Caleb's heart thundered. 6 armed men pointing guns at each other in his ranch yard. This was how wars started. This was how men died for the wrong reasons. Then Ayanna began to sing. It wasn't English. It wasn't a song Caleb recognized. Low and haunting, it rose up from his chest like smoke from a sacred fire winding its way across the dirt and dust of the ranch. Words older than the fence lines, older than any treaty. The effect was immediate. The deputies lowered their weapons slightly. Webb blinked. Even Hawkins seemed caught in its rhythm. Caleb felt it down to his bones. This wasn't just a song. It was a signal. Ayanna was calling to someone, no to many. The sound ended and silence fell hard and deep. For a long beat, no one moved. Then Caleb felt it. The ground. A faint vibration. Then another. Then a drumbeat of hoofbeats, distant but growing louder. Webb heard it too. His face drained again, eyes wide. How many, he asked, voice low. Ayanna smiled. Enough. And then they came. Over the ridge, like a vision from another world, Apache warriors. Dozens of them. Not raiders, not attackers. A procession. Horses in perfect formation. Feathers glinting. Spears sheathed but present. At the front, an older man rode like he owned the sky. His face was carved from time itself, gray braids decorated with eagle feathers. Caleb didn't need anyone to tell him. This was Chief Takakota, father of Ayanna. The circle formed fast riders surrounding the ranch, not with violence, but with presence. Caleb had never seen anything so quiet or so absolute. The chief dismounted, walked slow and sure toward the well, never once looking at Webb. He knelt beside his son. They spoke in Apache, low and urgent. Caleb caught fragments, ambushed truth letter. When it ended, the chief stood and faced Webb. His voice was perfect English, each word a hammer on stone. My son tells me you came here to murder him. Webb said nothing. He tells me who you serve, what you've done, who you've betrayed. Still silence. Do you deny it? Webb's throat worked, but no words came. The chief raised a hand. One of his men rode forward with a satchel. Inside were papers, dozens, letters, receipts, ledgers. Your correspondence, the chief said, with the men who've been selling weapons. Morrison was more thorough than you knew. Webb's world collapsed in front of him. Everything laid bare. There was nowhere left to run, but cornered men don't think clearly. He raised his pistol again, aiming it not at Ayanna this time, but at the chief. I'm not going alone, he spat, but he didn't get the chance to fire. Caleb Warwick, quiet rancher, loyal to no one but his land. Lunged forward, tackling Webb to the ground. The pistol skittered across the dirt. Dust flew. When it cleared, Webb lay pinned beneath Caleb, rage spent. Deputies moved to restrain him. Hawkins dropped his weapon, and the chief walked to Caleb, silent. Then with two hands on Caleb's shoulders, he spoke words in Apache. Ayanna translated, voice full of something beyond gratitude. You are now brother to our people, because you chose honor when no one else would. The dust was still settling when the mood shifted. Webb lay pinned beneath Caleb, spitting curses and dirt. His hands were tied, his power stripped clean. But the tension on the ranch hadn't eased, not yet. Because while one threat was down, another remained. The men, 5 deputies, 6 if you counted Hawkins, all armed, all uncertain. They stood in the half-circle like men standing on a cliff's edge, trying to decide whether to jump or fight gravity. Their eyes shifted between Ayanna, still wounded but upright beside the well, and Chief Takakota, now standing with the solemn poise of a judge at sentencing. And in the center of it all stood Caleb Warwick, dust on his shirt hands, raw from the scuffle, heart thudding like hooves on dry earth. He had no badge, no rank, no reason to speak, but when he did, the entire ranch listened. Every man here's got a choice, Caleb said quietly. You came here thinking you were hunting a killer, but the man you followed was lying to you. He lied to me too. He looked at each deputy one by one, not accusing, inviting. You don't have to follow him down the same road, but if you do, you better know where it ends. Deputy Bradley shifted his weight, the youngest of the bunch but not the greenest. His revolver still hung by his side, untouched now. I never signed on for murder, he said. Didn't join the marshal's office to be muscle for some gun-running scheme. You were just following orders, muttered Deputy Crane, the older one, gray at the temples. Hell, said another, that's what soldiers at Fort Ash said when they torched that village last spring. Just following orders. Bradley looked to the chief. That letter, it really says names, Ayanna nodded. Names, accounts, signatures, and Morrison gave it to you himself. Yes, Bradley's jaw worked. Then he looked at his fellow deputies. I believe him. Slowly he unbuckled his gun belt, let it fall. One by one the others followed suit. The only man still clutching steel was Hawkins. He hadn't moved since Caleb tackled Webb, but his eyes were burning holes through every Apache in sight. You all gone soft, Hawkins spat. He's an Indian, and you trust his word over your own marshals. Ayanna met his glare, not with anger, but with the weary steadiness of someone who had outlived too many gunmen like him. I'm not asking you to trust me, Ayanna said. I'm asking you to read the words of a man you already did. He tossed the letter forward. It landed in the dirt at Hawkins's boots. Hawkins didn't move, but someone else did. Chief Takakota stepped forward, his gaze like flint against steel. I've lived long enough to see peace made and broken, the chief said, his English sharp and flawless. I've buried sons to this land, and I've welcomed strangers who became brothers. Today you stand at such a line. He looked directly at Hawkins. No man is born evil, but some die that way by choice. For a moment no one breathed. Then Hawkins turned, muttering, and walked toward his horse. He didn't ride off, didn't pull his weapon, just stood there facing away from them all. He'd made his choice. Caleb felt something loosen inside him, like a knot untying from the inside out. It wasn't over, not yet, but something had changed. The threat of bullets had faded, and in its place came something harder to define: conviction. Ayanna swayed. His legs buckled slightly, and Caleb stepped forward on instinct, catching him before he hit the ground. You shouldn't be standing, Caleb muttered. Wasn't standing for me. Ayanna rasped, blood spotting his shirt again. Was standing for the truth. Caleb helped him back to the well, gently easing him down. The chief signaled a warrior. A young Apache stepped forward with a leather pouch of herbs and strips of cloth. They began tending Ayanna's wound right there in the open, no fear, no shame. The rest of the warriors remained mounted, silent and watchful. Deputy Bradley picked up the letter carefully, brushing dirt from the bloodied paper. He scanned the first few lines, his face changing with every sentence. Lord in heaven, he muttered. This name's half the supply depot heads from Tucson to Fort Jones. He looked up at Caleb. If what's in here checks out, this ain't just a cover-up. This is a war-for-profit operation. These men have been feeding fire to both sides just to keep their pockets full. And they needed Ayanna dead, Caleb said. Because peace doesn't pay, Bradley nodded grimly. But it does save lives, Ayanna added from the ground, his voice ragged but clear. Thousands. The chief turned toward Caleb, a rare smile breaking his weathered face. You gave him water. That single act rippled outward and shook mountains. Caleb blinked, unsure how to reply. He wasn't a preacher or a politician, just a man who'd chosen mercy once and now found himself standing at the heart of something much bigger than himself. You think they'll come back? he asked quietly, watching the ridgeline as if more riders might emerge. The chief's eyes didn't leave him. They will. Corruption does not die in silence. It roars when threatened. Ayana chuckled weakly, which is why I need to reach the council by dawn. Caleb frowned. You're in no shape to ride. Doesn't matter. If I don't show up, they'll assume the worst and the war starts again. Bradley stepped forward. Then we'll get you there. All of us. Caleb looked at him. You sure about that? Bradley nodded. The badge don't mean a damn thing if it's not standing for the right side. The men gathered their things, loading Ayana carefully onto a horse, with a makeshift support rig. It was going to be a long night ride, but they had everything they needed now. The truth, the letter, and men finally willing to listen. Caleb stood aside watching the group prepare. Then he felt a hand on his arm. Ayana. Their eyes met. You still think you just gave a man water? Ayana asked, half smiling. Caleb didn't answer, because deep down he knew that one act had changed everything. The sun was dropping fast, bleeding orange across the western sky like the last breath of a dying animal. The kind of sunset that made a man feel small, mortal. Caleb Warwick had seen 100 of them from this porch, but never with this many loaded guns around. Ayana's breathing had grown shallow again. Despite the herbs and tight bandage, he was losing blood faster than any man ought to and still stay upright. Caleb had offered to ride in his place, but Ayana had shaken his head. If I don't show up at the council in person, he said, voice hoarse, they'll think I'm dead, or worse, that I've betrayed them. He looked to his father, who stood silent at the edge of the well, arms crossed like stone. The treaty will burn, and with it everything we've built. Caleb didn't argue. Some men weren't born to run from fire, they were meant to walk into it. But there was still a problem no one dared speak. Webb, the disgraced marshal, sat tied to a fence post near the barn, blood on his chin from the scuffle. His expression had shifted from fury to calculation. He wasn't done. Not by a damn sight. Every now and then he muttered something under his breath, half to himself, half to Hawkins, who still lingered nearby like a dog that hadn't decided whether to bite or bolt. The rest of Webb's former deputies kept their distance. They didn't trust him anymore, but they didn't trust silence either. Ayana sat against the well again, one leg stretched, the other bent. His eyes were closed, but his lips moved. Soundlessly at first, then came the hum, low, like wind caught in canyon rock. Caleb looked up, brow furrowed. Ayana's hum turned to a tone, then words. Apache. It wasn't just a song, it was something older, a call. Caleb didn't understand the meaning, but he felt it like thunder rolling through the marrow of his bones. A melody that came not from a man, but from the land itself. From grief, from blood, from legacy. One by one, the Apache warriors turned their horses toward him. Then the wind changed. It carried a sound from beyond the hills. Hoofbeats, not 6. Not a dozen, many. A storm was coming. Webb's eyes went wide. No, he whispered. Caleb turned slowly toward the ridge. They came like smoke on wind. 50 Apache riders, fast and silent, their paint dark as ash, weapons slung but not drawn. Each one rode with the discipline of soldiers, not raiders. Their formation curved like a bowstring around the ranch. At the front rode a woman. Not old, not young. Her eyes were fierce, her body painted with symbols Caleb didn't understand, but the look in her eyes made even hardened lawmen step back. Ayana's sister. She dismounted before her horse had even stopped moving, boots kicking up dust. She crossed the yard and knelt beside her brother, speaking in Apache. Her voice sharp but warm. Ayana replied with a grimace and a half-smile. She says I look like a gutted deer, he muttered. She's not wrong, Caleb replied. Then Takakota stepped forward, raising both hands. He addressed his people, voice clear and commanding. Words like drum beats. Orders, Caleb guessed. Or truth. Then he turned to Webb. The circle of warriors parted. A younger Apache walked forward carrying a satchel. Inside documents, letters, receipts, ledgers. And Morrison's seal on every last one. The truth was no longer a matter of belief. It had mass, ink, names, numbers, and it stank of corruption from the territorial capital all the way to this ranch. Webb's face turned sickly. You broke into a federal office. No, the chief replied. We listened to Morrison before he died. He told us where to look. He wanted the world to see. Deputy Bradley stepped forward, flipping through pages. This is enough to bring down half the command at Fort Pine, he said, disbelief in every word. And the men you were protecting, Ayana added, eyes on Webb, were the ones burning our villages and blaming our people, all to keep the war alive, to keep the profits coming. Webb's mouth opened, but it was Hawkins who moved first. He stepped behind Caleb, quick, silent. Too late. The cold click of a pistol hammer. Caleb felt it behind his ear. Turn around, Cowboy Hawkins whispered. Caleb didn't move. You sure you want to do this? I'm the only one not in chains yet. That tells me something. What's it tell you? Caleb asked, voice steady. That I can still finish the job. But before Hawkins could react, Ayana spoke again. Not in English, he sang. The same melody from before, only this time louder, clearer. A song of death, of passage, of witness. Hawkins hesitated, and in that hesitation Takakota stepped forward, no weapon drawn, just his hand. Drop the gun, he said in English. Hawkins turned and met the eyes of 50 warriors with bows ready. He dropped it. The pistol hit the dirt with a soft thud. Silence returned. And for the first time since morning, Caleb felt the air shift, not from fear but from reckoning. Bradley turned to the group. What now? He asked. Caleb looked to Ayana. You said you need to reach the council. Ayana nodded. Then we ride, said Caleb. All of us. The Apache horses were prepared in minutes. Ayana was lifted gently onto a long stirrup mare flanked by his sister and a young warrior. Takakota placed a small carved figure in his son's palm, some kind of token. A vow. Caleb climbed into his saddle. No rifle. Just his hat pulled low and a will to see this through. Deputy Bradley and 2 others mounted up beside him. Only Hawkins and Webb remained on the ground. You'll never make it to Fort Richardson, Webb growled. Even with that letter, they'll bury it, just like they always do. Maybe, Ayana said, but not today. He spurred his horse gently and the column began to move. As they rode away from the ranch, Caleb looked back once. His land, his barn, his well. It had all changed, not in shape, but in meaning. That morning it was just soil and wood and stone. Now it was where the truth had stood its ground. The night wind blew cold through the mesquite, rattling dry branches like bones. The Apache column had ridden out, moonlight dancing off their paint and feathers. Ayana led them northward, his silhouette steady in the saddle despite the wound. But Caleb stayed behind. He stood in his yard boots, rooted to the earth, watching the dust of the procession fade into the dark. The truth had left the ranch, but the past hadn't, not yet. Webb still sat tied to the fence post, lips curled, eyes burning holes through Caleb like kindling waiting for flame. You think you've won? Webb growled, his voice low and rough. You think letting that savage ride out of here changes anything? Caleb didn't answer. Webb's mouth twisted into a snarl. He'll never make it. They'll cut him down before sunrise. Council'll call off the treaty, and you'll be left standing on a grave wondering why you didn't shoot when you had the chance. Caleb walked slowly toward him, step by step. I gave a man water, he said quietly. You're the one who brought the guns. Webb laughed, bitter as black coffee. You think justice rides on a song and a piece of paper? This land doesn't run on mercy, Warwick. It runs on power. And when the dust settles, it's men like me who still hold the reins. He spat at Caleb's boots, but Caleb didn't flinch. He reached down, untied the rope from the post. Webb blinked. What the hell are you? Caleb tossed the loose rope into the dirt. You're gonna walk, he said, back to Fort Bryer. In cuffs, with a letter pinned to your chest. You'll never make it. I'm not the one walking, Caleb replied. He turned his back and began toward the house. That's when he heard the scuffle. Boots on dirt, quick, desperate. Webb had slipped something from his boot. Caleb hadn't searched him close enough. A hidden Derringer barrel, short and ugly. He raised it with a snarl, shouting, "You're a damn fool, War!" A gunshot cracked through the yard, and Webb dropped like a sack of stones. The small pistol clattered from his fingers as he hit the dust clutching his side. Blood bloomed dark under his ribs. Deputy Bradley stepped out from behind the barn, revolver still smoking. His face was stone. You always talk too much, he said. Webb coughed, spitting blood. You shot your own boss. Bradley holstered his gun. Not anymore. Hawkins, who had been lurking by the stables, slowly raised both hands and backed away. I didn't see nothing, he said. I was done. I swear it. No one asked, Bradley replied. Caleb knelt beside Webb, watching the life drain from the man's pale eyes. You could have lived, he said, not with hate but simple truth. Webb laughed one last time, a broken, wet sound. I did, he rasped. My way. And then... silence. The stars hung still overhead, the wind settled, the land held its breath. Bradley stood beside Caleb, eyes not on the corpse but on the trail north. He gonna make it? He asked quietly. Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked toward the horizon where the echo of hoofbeats had long since faded. I think Caleb said finally he already did. 24 hours later, the ranch was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm when everything broken has been blown away but the scent of it still lingers in the dust. Webb and Hawkins had been taken, one in a pine box, the other in chains. The deputies, now no longer deputies, rode north to deliver the evidence. To testify. To make things right, or at least try. Caleb stayed behind. Someone had to. He repaired the fence Webb broke, washed the blood from his well for the third time, buried 2 jackrabbits that got caught in the crossfire, and then he waited. Until just before sunset when they came back. Not the whole Apache war party, just a handful of riders. Quiet, measured. Ayanna was with them, still bandaged, still pale but alive and smiling. The chief dismounted first, walked straight to Caleb and extended both hands, not to shake but to hold. Caleb didn't pull away. Ayanna stepped forward, speaking now in English so clear and sharp it cut through the wind. We brought something, he said. From the pack of his horse he pulled a long cloth-wrapped item. He placed it in Caleb's arms with the kind of care usually reserved for children or sacred things. Caleb unwrapped it slowly, a war lance. Not crude or ornamental, this one had weight, feathers darkened with age, beads worn smooth, leather grips faded by generations of hands. The chief spoke again, his voice deep as canyon stone. This belonged to my grandfather, and his before him. No man outside our blood has ever carried it. He placed his hand over Caleb's heart. Until now. Caleb didn't know what to say. Didn't need to. The warriors formed a loose circle, dismounting one by one. Each stepped forward, not to salute, not to bow, but to touch his hand. No words, just a silent gesture, a recognition of kinship, of belonging, of a man who stood when it mattered. Ayana spoke once more. You didn't just save me. You saved the peace, you saved the truth, and maybe, just maybe, you saved yourself. Caleb chuckled, low voice rusty from disuse. I thought I was already saved, or at least left alone. Sometimes, Ayana said, being alone isn't survival, it's surrender. The Apache mounted again, their silhouettes cast long in the gold of the setting sun. Before they turned to go, the chief looked back once. We ride to the council, to expand the treaty. The names have been given, the lies revealed, the killing may stop, for a while. Caleb nodded. That's long enough to matter. Ayana gave him a final look, one of respect, and something more, brotherhood. Then they were gone, swallowed by horizon and history. Caleb stood in the dust, the war lance in his grip, watching the trail long after it emptied. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a man watching the world move on without him. He felt like part of it. What did you think of Caleb's journey and the power of his choice? Like this story if it moved you, and share your favorite moment in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. The story of Caleb Warwick and Ayana delivers profound lessons about compassion, courage, and the transformative power of truth in a divided world. It teaches us that small acts of kindness, like offering water to a stranger, can spark monumental change, challenging deep-seated prejudice and corruption. Caleb's choice to defy fear and societal norms underscores the importance of empathy over hatred, showing that humanity can bridge even the widest cultural gaps. The narrative also highlights the courage required to stand for justice, even at personal risk, as Ayana's resilience and Caleb's unexpected heroism expose a web of greed threatening peace. This tale reminds us that truth, though costly, is a powerful force for healing and unity in our lives. It inspires us to question blind obedience, embrace compassion, and act with integrity in our daily choices. The vivid storytelling and moral depth make it a compelling call to reflect on our own values. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to support more inspiring tales. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts. What lesson from Caleb and Ayana will you carry forward?